Obsidian Entertainment is one of those studios that has a pretty rich history in terms of its CRPGs, but also, they've done a lot of contract work over the years and they've bounced around and worked on different franchises, working on Knights of the Old Republic 2, Neverwinter Nights 2, so on and so forth. But, their developers go all the way back to the Baldur's Gate days, and the Pillars of Eternity games have stood out to me as some of the best CRPGs I've ever played. Up there with the Dragon Age Origins experience, the Baldur's Gate 1 and 2 games, Icewind Dale 1 and 2, so on and so forth. And when they originally dropped the trailer for Avowed, man, it's got to be like, what, 4 years ago or something? I honestly don't know off the top of my head. And I'm talking the first trailer, like the teaser trailer from years ago. Not the most recent trailer that came out at the Xbox Game Showcase this year, which was absolutely mind blowing. Finally getting to see that the game in action and know that it's coming down the pipeline and it's just ahead of us. But the recent thing with Obsidian is they put out a series of documentaries on their channel celebrating their 20th anniversary as a company. And it's a lot to go through. I'll be honest, I haven't finished watching them all because it is a huge chunk of time to just dive in and find time to go through. But they're extremely rewarding if you really want to do deep dives into who the company is and what they've done as a company all the way up to being purchased by Microsoft and then under Microsoft wing having a much bigger budget and being allowed to work on much bigger and better things. And what's super interesting about all of that is that Avowed was originally going to be a multiplayer game. Ho 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 ho. And I know a lot of people initially are probably going to have a reaction that's like, ew, that's just, they probably just wanted to do it for microtransactions and all this other stuff and game as a live service. Well, you're kind of not wrong. And part of that conversation is when you are in the position of pitching games to publishers and trying to get funding for your next project, you have to make a game that publishers are willing to give you money to make. And if you're just trying to make something that is the same type of game as what's already been done before, you're not always going to get the money you're asking for. And so that's what part of this is about. So PC Gamer has a pretty cool overview on the part 5 of the documentary talking about this. And we're going to dive into this article today. But I think it's just very interesting in terms of the scope of what does multiplayer mean? Because you can see, like with Baldur's Gate 3, the Baldur's Gate 3 multiplayer is very much like the multiplayer in Baldur's Gate 1 and 2. But then there's the multiplayer like the way it's done in Diablo 4, where or in Destiny 2, or things of that nature, where you've got an always online game that you can hop into with lobbies and everything else. So there's different types of multiplayer. But without further ado, let's kind of dive into this here. It says here, Avowed was going to be multiplayer till the devs realized they wanted to make an Obsidian game and not something different. Um, so it talks here about, they've been celebrating their 20th anniversary with a bunch of in-depth documentaries talking about the history of the company and everything else. And it says here, it's been in the 2 decades, the studio's created some of the most beloved and intricate adventure/RPG titles ever made. Its current project is Avowed, a game that's destined to be compared to Skyrim because it is that first-person RPG element. But it is going for depth over breadth, where Obsidian really shines, as they say. And in the fifth and final part of the anniversary documentary, the studio's creatives reveal that for quite a while, Avowed had a multiplayer element. So Ferris Urquhart, Obsidian's head, said that when I look back at 20 years, there's decisions of mine that I feel really good about, and there's decisions that I feel not so good about. One of the things where I really pushed was that Avowed was going to be multiplayer, and I kept on that for a long time. And I know in the end that it was the wrong decision to keep pushing on it. He says that in the stage of development, at the stage that they were looking at this, Obsidian was still independent, and it's now owned by Microsoft. It says one of its concerns was how Avowed was going to be received by prospective publishers. Publishers like games with a multiplayer element because it allows them to monetize more and get more players in. So having that as part of the Avowed pitch would have made it more attractive to the bean counters. It says when you're asking for 50, 60, 70, 80 million dollars, you've got to have something interesting to talk about, and multiplayer made it more interesting. The problem was that it says here that multiplayer rubbed the wrong way against what Obsidian was really good at. And that's the thing. Obsidian is really good at making single player CRPG experiences. What's really interesting is if you haven't watched it yet, one of these days I actually need to cover the interview. Josh Sawyer came out and talked about this earlier in 2023 about how as much fun as they had working on Pillars of Eternity 1 and 2, he also felt extremely restrained by the fact that they were required to make a carbon copy of that isometric top-down, Baldur's Gate experience because he wanted to explore other avenues of game mechanics and game development. But because they kickstarted that project, they very much had to cater to the whims of the nostalgia audience. And while those games turned out very good and they were a lot of fun, he personally wanted to do different things. And I think this is where Avowed has allowed them to have a little bit more creative space to spread their wings. But they talk about here the problem was that multiplayer rubbed the wrong way against what Obsidian is good at, which is that single player experience. And it forced the studio to rethink how it would handle aspects that worked really great in their single player games, but wouldn't necessarily translate into that multiplayer context. Justin Britch, head of development at Obsidian, said, after working on it for a little bit, we realized that we weren't focused on the things we were best at. And so we made a pivot on the game to refocus and make sure that it was, at the end of the day, an Obsidian game and not something different. Now, this is where I'm going to point at BioWare as an example because BioWare has taken that plunge and done different things. They have not always been so well received. Some of their games, as great as BioWare has been at developing games over the years, when they have, I'll look at like Dragon Age as an example. Dragon Age 1, very top-down isometric, very classic Baldur's Gate experience. Dragon Age 2, totally different game. Dragon Age 3, totally different game. And I don't know if it's true yet, but like the leaks that came out with the Dreadwolf title, what is it? Is it Dreadwolf? I forget the name of the fourth one they're working on. Somebody, I have no idea if this is legit or true or not, but somebody claims that they had leaked footage that showed it being like a God of War style combat with the newest game. And I know there was immediately a pushback from some people that were like, oh no, they shouldn't be allowed to do that because that's not what Dragon Age is. And that's kind of what they're talking about here. Obsidian had built up a reputation for building a specific type of game, and if you ever break away from that, fans react negatively. And that's also what Josh Sawyer was talking about, in the sense that he wanted to do something different with Pillars of Eternity, but he couldn't because it was Kickstarted, and so they had to follow the nostalgia of the audience as opposed to branch out and do something different. It's very important if you want to keep a day job and, keep money coming in. Um, Says here a major focus now is Obsidian's Kerry Patel told PC Gamer after the game's announcement is on the companion characters, that will be part of the experience and following the character or the player through the story in the world. It says companions are a huge part of the experience and a draw for me both as a player and as a developer. One thing I wanted to do with Avowed was make sure the companions felt really integral to the story. In some games, they're optionally recruitable, but in Avowed, they are deeply tied to the story, tied to your party. We wanted to create this sense that you're in this big wild frontier, you're going on this adventure of discovery, and you have this small but tight knit crew with you. The sense that you're adventuring through the wilds together, sharing in the discovery and the danger. These people are just as much a part of your story as the larger events that you're getting in the middle of. Since here, Obsidian's been upfront about the fact that while Elder Scrolls comparisons are inevitable, it's not going for something as large and free form as that. Patel calls it a true Obsidian RPG, and given that it's made some of this writer's favorite RPGs ever, it sounds like just the ticket. It's due out for release next year. I would also argue that it's cool that they talk about having a focus on companions because the companion characters in Pillars of Eternity 1 were great, but I would argue that they were even better in Deadfire. Great romances, great dialogue, great voice acting. Having the Critical Role cast come in and do the Deadfire stuff was pretty amazing. I think Obsidian has always done great characters, going back to some of the Knights of the Old Republic stuff they did, Neverwhere Nights and stuff. So I think Avowed is in very good hands. I don't think it bothers me at all that it doesn't have a multiplayer component. I think they would have done it right had they done it because I think that they just do really cool games. And for my money, I've talked about this on my channel quite a few times. While Star Wars Outlaws is my current pick for favorite game of the year for 2024, Avowed is the second most anticipated title for me for 2024, and I will be absolutely playing the hell out of that game when it launches next year, and I'm hopefully going to be able to play it on my Series X. So, but either way, whether it's PC or Series X, I'll play it. I can't wait for it. Obsidian rocks. Great company, great game. Can't wait to hear more. Love to hear your thoughts on it. Like, subscribe, and hit that bell icon so you never miss an update. Drop your comments down below. Daily streams at 11 a.m. See you in the next video or in the Discord. Until then, everybody, stay safe and happy gaming.